questions from members of the media. I'll now invite the Minister, without any further delay, to the podium to commence with the briefing. Thanks.
No, thank you very much, Tsakani, and good morning to everyone. And just once more to thank the members of the media for making time to join us this morning, and also convey, if you like, this briefing to the rest of the country. So I'm extending my well wishes and good morning to everyone back at home. As Tsakani has indicated, I think we find it appropriate that we have on a periodic occasion an opportunity for us to share with the rest of the country the performance of the Energy Action Plan, which was unveiled by President Ramaphosa in July of 2022 as part of a government's coordinated effort to ensure that we are able to resolve load shedding. I thought that it is appropriate that I take this moment just to do a bit of reflection on the reasons why we are beginning to see the kind of improvements that we are witnessing. Of course, I've been making the point in the multiple briefings that I've been sharing with the general public that what is important is to look at the trend line. So what is this performance over an extended period of time? If you like a more longitudinal analysis of the performance of the grid, so that we are able to have an appreciation of what the trend line is. I do accept that there's going to be a momentary setback, if you like, given the nature of these machines, that it's almost a given that we are going to encounter setbacks. And I was saying that it is important that as we encounter those setbacks, we don't lose sight of, in fact, is a trend line, because the best measure of the degree and the efficacy of the Energy Action Plan is found in the trend line. And I do accept the levels of impatience from the general public, industry on the resolution of load shedding. Like I said, it's devastating to the South African economy. It's devastating to everyday life. It's a major disruption. So it's important that we're able to get it out of the way. So it's important that we use this occasion to share with you the trend line. So Eskom has initiated a number of interventions. And I want to emphasize that these interventions come on the back of the Energy Action Plan. So it's, if you like, an accumulation of these efforts over a period of now going close to 2 years. So about 18 months into these efforts. And we did make the point that some of these efforts, the results are not instantaneous. They'll be seen over a period of time. So what are some of these interventions that contributes to where we are today? The first one is the improvement on the plant conditions. So I did make the point that we had ramped up plant maintenance, and thanks in large part to the leadership of Eskom. So Dr. Mteto and the men and women who have services to serve the country, those who constitute the tremendous amount of skills and aggregation of experience and technical expertise that resides in the board. And also they are inspired the appointments. Of course, the last one was that of Mr. Dan Marukani, and the other one, Mr. Beki Nxumalo, has made this possible. So I think leadership issues are important in this conversation. So it's important that we are able to foreground that essentially is an aggregation, a constellation of the efforts, chiefly led by the board, and of course at an implementation execution level is the officers. So on the plant condition, we made the point that the ramping up of plant maintenance, very important. And that's why I made the point earlier on that if you look at the period December 2023 going into January of 2024, we took out 18% of the total generation capacity, about 9,000 megawatts at the go for plant maintenance. And we're beginning to see that these machines are coming back into service, they are coming back on load, and they're adding to the capacity on the grid. And this is helping us to address, if you like, the demand. And we're getting to situations more regularly where, if you like, supply is ahead of demand, of course, during this period. And we'll see that more of these machines will come on stream as we go towards the more winter period. So it's important that we are able to appreciate that. So and we are doing that within limits. So what I'm saying is that it's not reckless. So just taking everything out for maintenance. There's a need for us to ensure that we are able to meet the demand to the degree that is possible. If you meant to initiate load shedding, it's not at the elevated levels of load shedding. We have seen it during the period of December. We've seen it as we transitioned into the year. We have seen it over the past 11 or 12 days. So essentially, it's a testimony to those efforts. Again, at ESCOM, they also established a war room to ensure that you are able to have a focus, laser focus attention on how you are able to deal with planned maintenance, accelerated sourcing of spares, and ensuring that we are able to establish long-term service contracts. So on areas that are problematic, the Achilles heel, you are able to design contracts over an extended period, and of course performance-based, so that what we are incentivizing is the megawatts on the grid, and not incentivizing people coming to fix, contractors coming to fix machines that are failing. And that's the work that thanks to the leadership of the board and management that we are where we are today. And then to also address the issues of inadequate capacity. So here we're accepting that ESCOM is not the silver bullet, if you like. So our problems with regards to load shedding will not be solved by ESCOM alone. It's a major player, at least in the short term. But I think you need the additional generation capacity, and that's why the need to expedite that engagement with the independent power producers to the extent that ESCOM can make a contribution. We are able to get them on stream, on load as soon as possible. You know, the reforms that have been introduced, truncating the period with regards to the environmental impact assessment, the water use licenses. I had shared with the general public the efforts that have been made to ensure that you truncate that period and make it possible for the IPPs to be on stream as soon as possible. And then also the planned repowering of stations that were shutting. So, I mean, you know that they delayed the decommissioning so that we continue to sweat these assets as we build the new generation capacity, and also accepting that these machines are aging. At some point, they have to be retired. We have to commit to our nationally determined contribution. So we are not deviating from that. Just an appreciation that you are confronted with a crisis. It requires, if you like, extraordinary measures, including, amongst others, that delayed decommissioning. And then as we build additional new generation capacity outside the coal fleet, then you can go elegantly into the retiring of these units. And then the issues around the skills and expertise. So just an admission that as a result of both the objectives and subjective challenges that we're confronting ESCOM, there's been a hemorrhaging of skills. So it's important that we are able to ensure that we get the right people into the right position. And thanks to, like I said, at the apex level, the board has made the appointment of the CEO, and of course, also made the appointment of the head of generation. That stabilization is important, and the head of generation, Mr. Numalo, also made the appointments at the levels of stations to ensure that we get the most experienced, talented of those from within the ranks of ESCOM to be assigned these responsibilities. They need to ramp up training. That's the work that Mr. Marokan is doing, following on what Caleb, the S2 CEO, has been doing at ESCOM. Of course, the totality of management is important. And we also accepted that there's a need from time to time to draw from external experts. You know that there's that common platform where government engages with private sector on areas of a deficit in relation to expertise. We are able to draw from the private sector. I think it's a symbiotic relationship. I think we're all standing to benefit out of that. And that's part of the efforts that have been introduced. And of course, we introduce also ensuring that there has to be a culture of accountability, consequence management. When people commit to certain targets, if those targets are not met, first you try to assist, and if you think that really it's a lost cause, then you need to ensure that you introduce consequence management. It's a managerial function, of course, not necessarily in my domain, but I'm just reflecting on the work that the ESCOM has done exceptionally well. And then there are issues of fraud and corruption. The fact that the ESCOM has introduced greater levels of monitoring to ensure that we undermine, if you like, incidents of fraud and corruption, to ensure that it is sustained over a period of time. So it's important that there's a greater levels of appreciation, that it's a constellation of these efforts that are helping us to get to where we are. And then there's issues around procurement, the speed of procurement, agility of procurement from the right service providers. It must still remain transparent. It must still be competitive. Working with National Treasury, design a bespoke framework that makes it possible for ESCOM to ensure that they get to these spare parts as quickly as possible without undermining those principles of transparency and competitiveness. So that relaxation does not amount to discounting the importance of transparency and competitiveness. So we're finding that bespoke solution. And then the issues of funding. So outside the fiscal support, I think it's important that ESCOM was able to better manage, if you like, the deployment of capital, the deployment of maintenance budget, so that we undermine leakage. And ESCOM has made available funds for outage and mid-life refurbishment. When I say mid-life refurbishment, if you like, philosophy maintenance, these machines are designed to operate for X number of years. The expectation is that half into the life of that design life, you do major outage. So that major is it talks to the amount of work that has to be done, the period that that machine is out on outage, and of course, by definition, also the amount of money that is available. So there's the management of that is important, so that as you take out the machines, the budget is available, the space are ready, so that you don't experience outage slips. When you commit that I'll return this machine by this time, you indeed return the machine by that time, because there's been proper planning, and funding is not an issue. The issues of environmental compliance, what ESCOM has done engaging with the Department of Fisheries, Forestry and Environment, is to say that we think that without undermining the health of surrounding communities, without necessarily coming out as people who don't appreciate the impact of the emissions on climate change. I think it's important that we need to account for those, but also have an appreciation that we need to continue to, if you like, support the South African economy. So we have proposed an emission reduction plan that is achievable. That's not necessarily out of our bounds, but still remains ambitious. Ambitious, I mean, ensuring that we are keeping to the commitment of a reduction of emissions, so we don't impact negatively, adversely, the life of communities. And then on the coal, remember that one of the major issues that had received public attention was around the quality of coal and all those things that surrounded, if you like, the logistics arrangements with regards to coal. So what ESCOM has done is a better engagement, if you like, with the mines in relation to both the quality and the quantity of coal. So that we are addressing the issues of the quality of coal, and ESCOM has made the point that it's got implications on the performance of these machines, their efficiency, their reliability. So it's important that that conversation has happened. That conversation continues to happen, is sustained over a period of time. The need to renegotiate some of the agreements, and then greater investments in what we call cost plus mines. So these are mines where at adjacent to the power stations, where the coal is conveyed via a conveyor belt. ESCOM has got an obligation in relation to this kind of contracting, to ensure that it invests capital, to ensure that we continue to mine. One of the issues we had experienced was underinvestment in the cost plus mines, resulting in, if you like, issues of quality coal shortages. So working with the mines who are able to make these investments and ensure that we are able to address this situation. And then there are issues in relation to the new build defects. So you remember that one of the issues that had received public attention was the issues with regards to the new builds. When I say new builds, I'm talking of Kusile and Midupi, that there are inherent defects. Some of them have to do with, if you like, with the shenanigans surrounding procurement, their inability to monitor and observe the quality of the workmanship there, if you like, the originality of some of the components, and resulted in many failures as a result of that. So that's an area that has received the attention, and ESCOM has solution for that, and developed and tested some of these solutions on Medupi Unit 3, and the intention is that you're using that template to roll it out to all other units so that they were able to achieve the desired performance. So the point I'm making is that ESCOM didn't just lament the situation. So it's done everything possible to ensure that with the exceptional expertise that resides within ESCOM, we're able to find solutions, and those solutions are beginning to bear fruit as we are seeing now. And then on the issues of Rotec Industries, the fixing of the turbines, the center lines there, greater levels of oversight, additional expertise to ensure that we are able to address these challenges. Rotec, if you like, it's an engineering arm of ESCOM. So the point there is important, just an appreciation that the ESCOM had over a period of time built sufficient internal capacity from an engineering point of view, research point of view, innovation point of view. You find that with this new leadership led at the board level by Dr. Mteto and the team of men and women who constitute the board, the executive management team, we are retaining all of those into force, and you are beginning to see that of these efforts can only help to improve the performance of the grid. And then what are some of the successes so far as a result of these interventions that I've shared with you? Is that the National Treasury, like I said, they relaxed some of the requirements. So this results in the speed of procurement. We are reducing slowly this thing of outage slips, because outage slips is our inability to return the units at the time that we promise we'll return them as a result of, amongst others, if you like, the inordinate process that accompanies the procurement process. And I really want to emphasize, because this point can be overemphasized. You are not undermining transparency, you are not undermining competitiveness. It's just the speed with which you are able to procure. The nimbility. So you must be nimble, you must be agile on your feet to ensure that you are able to address this situation, especially when you have units failing. You don't have time to plan. So it's important that the shortest possible time is taken, of course, with due regard to professionalism, proper work, that these machines are returned. It's a function of the procurement environment. So we've designed this procurement to be bespoke, to reflect the characteristic nature of ESCOM. And I'm sure that in other SOEs, it will take a different complexion. But here's just an appreciation that speed is important. I've made the point on the allocation of outage budgeting has improved. So when I say outage budgeting, so I'm talking about planned maintenance. We know that we are going to, ESCOM knows is going to take this unit out in the next 3 months. Make sure that the spares are available. For you to ensure that the spares are available, appreciating that there's long lead time. Some of these spares are not bought off the shelves. That's the nature of the units that you are dealing with. So money must be available. So money can't come later. You take out the machines and you are waiting for money. Money must be available. Procure long lead items. They should be available. By the time you take out the units, you know that the resources are there. The human resources, the components are there. You have dealt with the capital requirements to get the components in the workshop. Then let's get the machine fixed and we're able to return it on time. I did make the point that we have succeeded in engaging productively with external stakeholders. They are part of this conversation. They are contributing to the resolution of this problem. And the priority power stations there are receiving attention. We have made the point, Duva, Kendall, Kusile now is graduating out of priority power stations, because thanks to the work that has been done by a team of diligent men and women, professional, patriotic, committed to the resolution of this problem. So Kusile will not flag as one of those power stations as a result of this work that we've been doing. Of course, Tutuka still remains a challenge, working with the station manager there, someone that has been appointed, exceptional skills, Mr. Bruce Moyo and his team. We're sure that we are going to take it out of this situation. So we want to graduate the priority power stations because we appreciate that once we get these ones right, then we're sailing. I think we would have sailed through the headwinds, and we will be in the open and are able to ensure that on a very sustained basis, you don't have load shedding, and then we work on securing energy sovereignty for the country going into the future. So I think it's important that there's that appreciation of what has been happening. Just a juxtaposition of what is this kind of improvement in numbers terms from a load shedding point of view. So if you were to take the 1st to the 31 of March 2023, you will see that we only have about two periods of stage 1 load shedding, and now we in this similar period, this financial year, this year rather, calendar year, we only have one stage of load shedding. When it comes to stage 2, the previous 23 we're sitting at 3, and this year it was higher at 12, and I'll come back to that. At stage 3 we had 7 if you like stages of stage 3 in this period, the 1st to the 31st of March 2023. In 2024 we had 9, again higher than what we had experienced. But I think if you look at the higher stages, stage 4 last year, March, this period, the month of March was 12. This year it's 4. Stage 5 last year, March, it was 6. We didn't have this year. Stage 6, of course, we didn't have for both years. And if you put them together for the month of March, number of days of load shedding, it was 30 occasions where we had these various stages of load shedding compared to 26. But what is the important conversation there is that you can see that stage 1 to stage 2 accounted for half of what we experienced this year, as compared to stage 4 and stage 5 of last year. Last year accounted to half of what was experienced last year. So what is the message you are conveying here? Is that the intensity of load shedding is coming down. And that's the point I make all the time. It's just a general appreciation on the trend line, that there's that appreciation. Oh, okay, that's the trend line that we are experiencing. Of course, with regards to the EAF at the year end, I think the preliminary indication is that we'll be at 54.6, away from that target of 60%, 6%, 5.4 percentage points out. But we can see that going into the future, we are confident about this ability. And of course, what is important there is just an appreciation that we had aggressive plant maintenance, the point I made all the time. So if we had relaxed that plant maintenance, I had made the point previously, you will see that will be much closer to that target that Eskom has set itself for the financial year, much closer to 60% of EAF, but went very aggressive on the plant maintenance, of course, within acceptable limits, and then we're beginning to see the results of that now as we move into the future. And then going into the future, what is it that we should expect, at least in the immediate future, before the end of this calendar year? So essentially, I'm talking in the next 5 months, what is the message you are conveying to the country? I'm happy to say that thanks to the ingenuity of the leadership of Eskom, we are able to bring Medupi 4 much earlier than anticipated. Remember that this is a unit that had gone out, I think, as a result of fire. And if you look at the lead time that were required for us to get a brand new generator, I think the expectation was that we're going to return Medupi unit number 5 by 2025. The management of Eskom looked across the world, find a generator of a similar specification. It's a second-hand generator. Appreciate that these generators are designed to have a life of up to 50 years. And this one still had about 15 years of life. We were able to procure that generator. And that generator now has been delivered to the power station Medupi on the 5th of March. And of course, it was then unloaded. You can imagine the size of that generator on the 11th of March. And then we are confident that it will be commissioned by August of 2024. So essentially, we have truncated, reduced that by approximately a year. We're able to bring it early. And that's, if you like, the innovation, ingenuity that is brought about by an exceptionally competent board and having appointed the most competent, if you like, management team, that beyond the norm, what is common, what are the other solutions that are available, and just an appreciation that you can get this generator secondhand, of course, with the necessary assurances guaranteed from the original equipment manufacturer that it still has life. We can extract life out of that, and then we're able to relieve the grid. We're able to bring that 800 megawatt. That is in August of 2024. Quebec Unit 2, you know that it has gone out, extension of license. Of course, we'll make our submissions to NERSA. They'll make the determination whether the extension is granted or not. But from where we are, doing our best, and we are confident that we are on track to return this by September of 2024. That's another 932 megawatts. And again, Kusile, as you know, that is still a construction site. There's one unit that still is yet to be commissioned and synchronized. So we are confident that by September, we'll be able to get that 800 megawatts. So essentially, if you come to think of it, in the next 5 months, we should be able to get, if you like, 2,583 or so megawatts of new generation capacity. So that's the message that we are conveying. So it's just the prospects in the immediate future. And that the immediate future is in the next 5 months. And this is the work that the team has been doing. And of course, the issues of the permanent stake project remains on course with the units being synchronized between November of 2024 and 2025. I'm talking about unit 1 to 3. Remember that we have a temporary solution, so it's important that we restore the original conditions, because we have made a commitment to the Minister of Environmental Fisheries and Forestry that it's an interim solution. We do appreciate the downside from the health implication, the environmental implication. We need this window. We'll do everything possible to ensure that we're able to address the environmental and health adverse impact. We presented a plan. On the strength of that plan, we're granted this temporary solution. So it's important that there's that appreciation. I was reading somewhere that we're going to lose 2,400 megawatts. Of course, I mean, these things are done in stages. So at any given point, when you connect the one unit into the permanent stake, it's just 800 megawatts. So I think it's important that the context is appreciated. And then on the coal stockpiles, I'm happy to say that the levels of all the stockpiles are healthy. So, and then also accounted for wet conditions. So you'll find that the issue of wet coal and the like should be something of the past. ESCOM's leadership management is transfixed on the resolution of this problem, including all individual components of the value chain. So on the coal side, the point I'm making is that these are things that have received additional attention. So those are some of the highlights. I'm making this point so that the country must have an appreciation that the kind of improvement you are seeing is not an accident. So essentially, it's an investment made by men and women, competent, primarily at the ESCOM. The leadership, of course, at an executive level, the political leadership, the leadership principally at the board level, but most importantly, the CEO and his executive management team are able to deliver the kind of results that we are seeing. I have to emphasize that there will be setbacks. It's the nature of this. So if tomorrow there's some load shedding, doesn't mean that the trend line is dissipated. So it's important that there's an appreciation of this trend line. We're trying to undermine opportunities for these units to fail, because as they fail, then the system operator must initiate load shedding. So I'm making the point is the trend line. You can see the kind of benefits we are seeing. Will be setbacks. Those setbacks are given. So when you encounter a setback, and by setback I mean when there's load shedding, don't think, oh, we're diverting from that. We remain on course in relation to that trend line. And like I said, this additional generation capacity of these 3 units, I've not yet accounted from new generation that is coming from the private sector. We will share that with you in due course, so that there's an overall appreciation that we're addressing the totality of this intervention. So there's no decoupling. There's nothing called that. The kind of improvement we are seeing is as a result just of the improvement of the EAF outside what the renewables are giving us, or alternative is as a result of the renewables outside the EAF. No, that's a myth. It's a misnomer. It's all of these things put together. So there shouldn't be a binary conversation. It's a misleading conversation. It's about pulling all of these things together. And that's why the Energy Action Plan says fix Eskom. I've shared with you in detail the work that is being done by Eskom, new generation capacity, renewables, private sector investment, the issues of the reforms. When you pull all of that together, then it results in the kind of, in the long-term energy sovereignty. In the short-term, Eskom has got a disproportionate amount of responsibility to help us to resolve this, but it's the totality of these interventions that are going to help us to resolve the challenge going into the future. I'm happy to say the following. Of course, Eskom did release if you like, a media statement in this regard. The issues around undermining vertical integration. I spoke ad nauseum in the last update, ensuring that there's competitiveness, there's multiple players on the generation side, multiple buyers, create a platform that ensuring that to procure on a non-discriminatory basis. You are democratizing the platform. We think that the aggregate, the net result amongst others, is electricity that is relatively affordable, greater adoption of technology and innovation, increasing levels of efficiencies will result in greater levels of investment because you have opened up, but you have not privatized. Eskom continues to be a major player on the generation side. We'll come back on the Eskom project on the generation side, but we accept that you have to open up for private sector so that you are able to allow for this competitiveness and the net gain. Two of them that worth mentioning. The first one is that the grid is becoming more and more stable because we've got more players on the generation side. The second one is that the electricity doesn't see exponential increases, that it becomes unaffordable, resulting in energy hunger. Essentially, by that I mean the electricity is available, but the people can't afford it. That's energy hunger. You don't want to get to that situation. It must remain affordable. And that's why it's important that this competitiveness is introduced. So the National Transmission Company of South Africa has received consent from the relevant lenders and creditors. I did say now all of them. The passing of resolutions by government and boards of NTC and Eskom, as well as the approval for electricity license and other regulatory requirements by NERSA. So these are the suspensive conditions. So these are conditional to the proper functioning, full functioning of NTSA. All of those things have been met. And then the next steps really is that the fulfillment of the Companies Act requirements, and also once all assets, systems, and employees have been transferred to the National Transmission Company of South Africa, and trade commences, the NTCSA will be wholly owned Eskom subsidiary. So this is an important part because I think in other domains they talk about privatization. Underline, it's wholly owned Eskom holding subsidiary. Eskom is an asset of the state. So the South African citizen is a shareholder in Eskom. So there is no relinquishing of that ownership. NTCSA remains in that stable. It's part of the Eskom stable, wholly owned by Eskom Holdings. So the South African public is a shareholder in NTCSA. It's not a precursor to privatization. I think it's important that there has to be that appreciation. As I conclude, just to indicate that we can see that the weekly averages have been going up. I think the past week we are now at 28,000 megawatts compared to the 27,000 megawatts. An area that should receive attention and is receiving attention from Eskom side is to bring down the unplanned capacity loss factor and the partial load losses, because that speaks to the megawatts that are outside, that are not generating, that are not on load. Of course, the average for the week 25 to 29th of March was 14,000, and in the past week was 15,000. Our target, the target internally is that just be at 14,000 as a minimum. You know that in terms of their summer outlook, they put it at 14,500. So it's important that we keep to that message, and in fact, we improve it. And that's an area that a blemish, and I want to say to the country that is something that is receiving attention. So that as we move into the colder period, as demand is going to be ramped up, once we were at sub 14,000, we are confident about our ability to ensure that the sustained period of lower stages of load shedding on some days. So it's important that there's that general appreciation. Having said all of the above, I do admit that there are areas where we need improvement, as is in the nature of any organization. Continuous search for improvement, even at the ESCOM point of view. I think the unplanned capacity loss factor and the partial load losses are areas that requires attention. Just as I conclude, I think it's important that we also just a brief reflection on the renewables. And as a point I made, I think one of the things that I think has been a major shortcoming of the briefing I gave was just the focus on ESCOM and not just sharing with you what is the performance on the renewable side. And that gives life to this conversation of a binary discussion. Is the EAF versus, if you like, renewables? No, we must do both. So just to give you an indication, the total renewables is about 6,430 megawatts, made up of concentrated solar power, the wind, PV, and also hybrid. So when you pull all of those together, it's 6,430 megawatts. And then we did make the point, take account of rooftop installations, about 5,440. So what have we experienced? So this is a point to be made, is that during the summer months, the wind generation aligns almost perfectly to the high evening peak demand and the low night minimum demand. So there's a correlation between what we are generating from wind and the peak demand. So it's really performing its intended function, that it must contribute to the fleet of ESCOM so that we are able to meet the peak demand. However, in winter, when the cold front passes through the Western and Eastern Cape, the wind generation increases significantly. So you are going to see, if you like, a greater contribution of wind. And as the cold front arrives in the densely populated Gauteng area, the cold weather drives demand for electricity. And we know that the concentration of load in Gauteng, you also know that the most number of households, again, in Gauteng, and of course, if it gets cold, it's going to drive that demand. And that's why I'm saying we must ready ourselves for the winter condition. And at the same time, the wind generation reduces significantly due to the low trough behind the front. And this is a double whammy. What is the double whammy? Is that that the reliance on wind is coming down. When we go into this winter period, it's coming down. So the peak is going up during that winter, but the contribution of wind is coming down for those factors. And then you are losing on additional generation demand, and then there's a ramp up in the demand, and you can see the gap between generation and demand goes up, and that's what is undermining, if you like, that perfect equilibrium that makes it possible for us not to have load shedding. So it's important that there's that general appreciation, and of course doing everything possible to undermine those gaps. But the new generation capacity from the multiplicity of sources is going to help us to address this situation. On the rooftop solar solution, so we have broken it down. So you can see that the Gauteng accounts for about 1,500 of that 5,400 or so of the megawatt. So essentially, you are sitting at about 30% of installed roof capacity is in Gauteng. And it's on account of two things, really. It's the most populous and therefore most number of households. And of course, there's a concentration of industry. And of course, we do have some of the most affluent suburbs here. And that's why you see that the rollout of rooftop solar solutions. So it's important that there's that appreciation. So if you have, if you like, a cloudy day like today, inclement weather, and this is across the country, we are likely not to benefit from these assets. And that's why I'm saying that it's a misnomer to talk of renewables saving us from load shedding. It's a combination of that. Everyone now draws from the grid. Even those who want to recharge their batteries, they are going to draw from the grid. So it's important that it's a holistic conversation. It's just a general appreciation of where we are. So we'll continue to do this reflection, just an appreciation of where we are. And you can see that the February month, the January month, we had seen a significant amount of that generation capacity, and the rest is almost evenly dispersed across the country. And as expected, the Northern Cape, the least amount of households and industry. We can expect that the rooftop solar solutions will be lower because the amount of rooftop space, the total rooftop space, is significantly lower as a result of being the least populated of the provinces in the country. So we thought that it's important that there's that general appreciation of where we are. We continue to do the work, not complacent, very, very far from where we want to be, because where we want to be, it's about the elimination of load shedding. We don't celebrate the extended period of no load shedding. We want to stand before the country and say we have eliminated load shedding. But there's an admission that for us to get there, it's a stepwise approach. First, reduce the intensity and frequency of load shedding. I've given you snippets of facts that they confirm that we're going in that general direction. Like I always say, you don't have to believe me. Just count the number of days your lights are, hours your lights are on or off in a day compared to the same period in the previous year. You'll see that there's an improvement. But they will do that reduction slowly of the intensity and frequency of load shedding, and we'll get to a point where we'll be able to declare to the country that we now have sufficient generation capacity with enough buffer to account and accommodate any unexpected surge in, if you like, units failing, cluster of units failing, still have the enough capacity to meet demand. Once we get to that stage, I'll be the first one to say to the country that we're over the line. We're now working on energy sovereignty, energy security, but where we are, it's important, a general appreciation that we're still fighting to improve that trend line, to address both the intensity and frequency until we get to a point where load shedding is something that is behind us. So thank you very much, Tsagan.
Thank you very much, Minister. Colleagues, we will now open the floor to questions from members of the media. Do we have questions in the room? By a show of hands, do we have questions in the room? There's Katleho there. Do we have a roving mic? So Katleho, you'll use the table microphone, and then we'll take her as well, and we'll stick to our established protocol where you introduce yourself and the media house that you're representing.
Right, good morning, Minister. My name is Dr. Ramokgopa from the SABC. We just wanted to find out your understanding of where we find ourselves in terms of NERSA passing through those protocols to stage 16. We saw a lot of people from the public reaching out to the media just with an understanding of what do those protocols mean. What does the ramp up those protocols to stage 16 mean for consumers? Is this an indication that maybe in the near future we'll see Eskom ramping up as load shedding beyond stage 6 to maybe stage 16? Can I get a response from that? And maybe just give us a sense, Minister. You've been in the office for over a year now. Maybe give us a sense of basically, are we reaching an end? When can we expect load shedding to end? Because ultimately, people coming through to view these briefings week in, week out, they would like to know as to when can we expect load shedding to end. So when can we really expect load shedding then to end in this particular regard? And are you able to also, then lastly, the third one on my end, give us a winter outlook? We see outside that it's really bad. So are we going to see extraordinary measures applied by Eskom here going into the winter season to try by all means to cushion consumers, as we know very well that around this time, that's when the grid becomes a little bit strained. Thank you.
Thank you, Katlego.
Thanks, Shannon Kuku from PNCA. Minister, my question, some of them have been covered by Katlego, but also just in terms of the OCGT, we've seen, I think, on the 2nd or the 3rd of April, there were 4 that were used, and then before that, right at the beginning, there were 0 used, and I think the latest updates you had on them, which was, I think, yesterday or the day before that, there were 0 used. Just how many have been used over this period that we've had no load shedding, and yeah, how many have been running? Also, just your diesel budget in 2022, 2024, can you give us just final numbers in terms of that, and also what is your diesel budget for 2024, 2025? And I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you, Ashoni. Itumeleng, do we have questions online?
Yes, we do have questions online. The first question is from Helmut Bruce from Independent Media. What is Eskom demand forecast for this year? What is the NESA approved budget for OCGT diesel? How has the recent bad weather impacted non-Eskom generation? What plants have an EFA above 80%? How is the poor skills level at plants being addressed? And then the second question is from Angelo Coppola from CGTA. Minister, while not directly in your portfolio, what is your position in Sasol getting a free pass on its emissions levels? It appears to remain as if they are getting special treatment. Will this approach be adopted with non-compliant power station under your jurisdiction? And the third question is from Lamis or Magic from. Does Eskom or the minister have any response to the study by the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, which projects there will be at least 30,000 deaths linked to delayed? The second question is, once Unit 5 returns to service, will the power station be operating at full capacity?
Thank you. We'll now take responses. We'll start with Mr. Shun Magam. He'll be followed by the minister.
It's on, right? Thank you. I'll take the questions linked to the generation performance. I think let's start off with Katlego. I think just in terms of the winter outlook, we're still going through a process of approval, but the general sentiment in terms of the plan for the outlook is to have our planned maintenance hovering around 3,000, and then to get the breakdowns to below 14,000. Okay, and we believe with that scenario, we should be in a good position in terms of load shedding. There would be days, but I think as you've seen previous outlook plans, we plan on 3 scenarios, and the aspiration for the generation team is to actually perform below the 14,000. So I think that will give us enough leeway in terms of this coming winter, especially with the higher demand. Then in terms of the OCGTs, I think in terms of the budget, this year, once again, as a trade-off against load shedding, slightly over the budget. However, when one looks at Eskom's bottom line, some of the IPP budget and some of the other expenses were under. So in terms of the bottom line, that's been the trade-off. With regards to Medupi 5, I think once Medupi 5 comes online, that'll be commissioned. We'll have Medupi 6. I'm sorry, you talked about Medupi 5. I'm assuming it's Medupi 4. Yeah, so I think it's Medupi 4. Once again, the intent is for it to come back on its generating capacity of 100 megawatts. I'm just thinking in terms of other questions that I've picked up. Minister, I'm not sure if you want to take the rest. Okay.
Okay. Okay. No, thank you very much for those questions. I think the body that does that planning for the various stages, I think that it's an independent body that really helps to ensure that from the systems operator point of view, there's a degree of predictability if you are to go to those levels of load shedding. So it doesn't suggest that you are going to go to stage 16 load shedding. And the point I always make is that we must allow each and everyone to make a contribution from their own area of competency, their area of mandate. They must execute their responsibility. So essentially now you know that even in the ultimate worst case scenario, that the system operator has got an ability to ensure that you protect the grid in a manner that all the players and the stakeholders understand. So that's the exercise that they've been doing. I make the point that everyone that can afford has taken medical aid. So it doesn't follow that you are expecting that tomorrow you'll be hospitalized. So essentially it's an insurance measure. And that's what this exercise has been doing. So it's got no correlation with where we are at, but simply to say that going into the future, if we are to have this scenario, this is how the system operator must manage the grid. So we welcome that. And I was saying that to colleagues, we must welcome that because there must be proper planning, even for the worst case scenario. I always make the point that it's important that even when you go through a green patch, you are meeting all of your results. Every time you have to know that if there's a doomsday scenario, this is how we are going to manage that situation, and that's what the exercise is doing. So we welcome it as a part of, if you like, a broader articulation on how we are addressing the issues rather of energy security in the country. Now that question, I know every time it comes, I will not stand here and mislead the country and say by this date is going to end. I'm simply sharing with you the efforts that we are making is giving us this trend line. I'm sharing with you what will come on stream, new generation capacity in the next 5 months or so. We'll come back and share with you what's coming on stream from the private sector. And I'll say that if all of these promises materialize, then it means by this period, we should have achieved, if you like, some degree of energy security, would have ended load shedding. I'm not in that at that point. So the last thing I will do is to mislead the country. We are not there. When we are there, I'll tell you that this is the date. Give us an opportunity to address this. We understand the impatience, the grievance, the anger that it has taken long. And I'm going to be brutally honest. That has been the nature of my engagement with the South African public, household, all the stakeholders, business. It's just the candid nature of the conversation. I think it's important. So I'm not in that position to say by this date. I'll share with you the trend line. Once we have confirmed that new generation capacity, when is it coming on stream? Not just ESCOM, but if you like, new generation, then we'll be in a position to say by this date, we are confident that generation will far exceed the demand with the necessary buffer to account for any unpredictability without requiring us to initiate any stages of load shedding. And then with regards to the issues around the Sasol emissions, I mean that everyone makes an application to the Minister of DFFE, and the Minister applies a mind and arrives at a determination. In the same manner, ESCOM has made an application to say that these are emissions that we think are achievable without necessarily undermining our ability to continue to generate electricity without putting lives at great risk. We submit that to DFFE. The minister will make a determination. So I'm not about to encroach in that space. Really, that's not our space. We have done everything possible to satisfy what the requirements are. I have not encountered that study. Of course, I'll go through it, what the people suggest on what are the implications of an extended life of this coal-fired power station. I guess that's the domain, if you like, of the Minister of DFFE. Will make the submissions. She'll look at all sorts of studies, and of course their own internal study, the veracity of those studies, arrives at a determination. On the basis of that determination, then she'll be able to communicate to us. So it's something that we will leave to the Minister of DFFE. And I did say that from a skills point of view, of course, ESCOM gone back to, if you like, bolstering those skills, the issues around training. The training center now is a hive of activity. There's an appreciation of what is new generation that is likely going to come on stream. Of course, the issues of nuclear, you need to build that pipeline, amongst others. So ESCOM is looking at all of that. And I'm sure that at the right time they can share with you what are those details, because that's in the management domain. The only reason why I was surfacing that is just to give the country a general appreciation that ESCOM is aware of areas of weaknesses, and those are attended to, including the bolstering of the skills, ensuring we shore up the skills, because there's been some degree of hemorrhaging of skills over a period of time. Restore ESCOM to its former glory. That's what Dr. Mteto is doing at the board level, and Mr. Marokan and his executive management team, of course, supported by the executive authority, are confident about the future of ESCOM and its role on the generation side, together with new players in that space. It will become more competitive, like I said, and hopefully the net gain will be to the grid itself, but also to the end consumer. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister and Mr. Shunmakam, for the clarity and the responses. We will now take our last round of questions. We will start in the room as we did initially. I see Hloni's hand is up. Are there any other hands in the room? So we'll take Hloni and then we'll go to Katleho and then to Itumeleng for the questions that have been shared virtually.
Thanks. Just in terms of the number for the OCPC budget, can we get specific numbers in terms of this past financial year and the coming financial year? When you say that the slightly over budget, but they were trade-offs, can we get specific numbers from the past financial year and the budget for the present financial year? And then maybe for the minister also, I mean, you're talking about the consistency, and now you're talking about anticipated setbacks. Also mentioned that you can't say a specific date for when load shedding will end. How long do you expect this period of sunshine, I guess, to end when you talk about those setbacks? And then maybe lastly, related to that, how much does demand play in terms of what we're seeing at the moment? Obviously, in a period where it's become colder in the past few days, but we still don't have load shedding. Yeah, how much does the demand play a role in this?
Thanks, Hloni.
Mine is on the solar PVs as well. Do we still see the government working to incentivize those that would move, especially businesses that would move to, more or less install solar PVs? Are we encouraging them to go into that space as well in terms of helping ESCOM here? Because we've seen the minister give us an update on the intervention around that space. And also, as you mentioned, Minister, the issue of corruption that at ESCOM, you're dealing with issues of corruption and making sure that you support the new executive there, Mr. Marokani, and maybe give us a sense as well as to the SANDF members. Are they still there on the ground? Do we see some of these issues, some of these developments, and the security at some of these power stations likely to be attributed to the fact that you still have a tight security in case something happens there? Looking at the past, whereby some of these stations were targeted. And also on the issue of coal, are we expected to see a wide-scale investigation from your end as the department? Because you've mentioned here that you're working with mines to work around issues of coal and more or less clear that particular issue. Are we more or less expecting concerted efforts towards an investigation as to what has happened in the past and why then we find ourselves with this somewhat of a core syndicate that will be operating in some parts of these mines, especially in the Mpumalanga province.
Thanks, Katlaho. We'll take questions that have been shared virtually. Dumeleng, please take us through.
Okay, Clarence Prima from Engineering News. Given that Cabinet has its final meeting ahead of the 29th May poll, does that mean that the plan to facilitate private sector's participation in the development of the grid has not been considered by the executive and cannot move ahead to implementation? The second question is, when will ESCOM present its winter plan? And the third question is, will ESCOM continue to set EAF target as part of the recovery plan? And the last question from Charles is, when will the NTCSA be fully operational? And the second question is from Dylan Erasmus from Business Day. Given that ESCOM missed its EAF targets for 2023-2024, does the EAF target that was set for 2024-2025 year still stand, or will this target be amended? And the last question is from Chris Euland from the EE Business Intelligence. Does the minister expect the electricity regulation amendment bill will be enacted by the end of May 2024?
Thank you.
Hi, so this is not a new question. It's just my previous question in the first round wasn't answered about the use of the OCTCs in the fixed access month of this period. Mr. Please can we have your name and the surname and the spelling?
Okay. We'll text you the name and the surname, the spelling. It's Mr. Eric Shunmakam from ESCOM's Generation Division. And then we noted the question on the OCGT, the specific numbers. So we'll take responses starting with Mr. Shunmakam, followed by the Minister. Thank you.
So I think what's important is the message from the Minister, right, is that you have the renewables complementing the base load. So if you really look at what's happened in terms of the diesel usage, okay, if the fleet performs well, and if you've got sunny days and the wind blows, you've got good support coming from the renewables, and ultimately the usage on diesel is less, right? The other compensating factor is we also have pump storage to actually use that, because during the day, okay, it's free electricity. So ultimately, we use that pump storage to also help in terms of the demand. Then you take a day like today when it's overcast, right? So even if we've seen the performance is, we've seen a slight decrease in increase in UCLF, which means the performance degraded a bit. You also then have your renewable resources not coming through, and all that means is you're going to have to use diesel to actually support the system. Hence, you'll see that variability. So in an ideal world, we cater for this diesel to actually help during our morning peaks and evening peaks, okay? If we have sufficient reserves, then generally we will not use these diesel reserves because it's an expensive resource. And then once again, when you compare using this diesel resource to load shedding, it's a much cheaper resource compared to load shedding the country. So I trust in terms of the issue around the figures that you've been measuring over the last day or the last week, that gives context. In terms of the budget, I know we are over. We are busy just wrapping up because it's year end with the figures. I think I'm happy to report in the coming media briefs just to give you that feedback. With regards to what's planned again for the coming year, I can confirm it's substantially lesser than what we planned for last year. Last year, I think, was a conscious effort that we, through our shareholder, through National Treasury, because of what the projection was going to be in terms of load shedding, we actually catered for that, and we know the budget was around 30 billion rand. And going into this coming year, once again, I think in the next briefing we can confirm the figures, but I know it's substantially lower. Then moving on to some of the other questions with regards to the winter plan. The winter outlook, the intent is to give feedback towards the end of April. We are just now following governance process, going through the various approval process, and I think one that's done through Eskom's communication stakeholder and communication department. We will schedule that session and communicate. But in keeping with the tradition on winter, we will definitely do lesser planned maintenance. And in terms of the plan for unplanned, the recovery plan will continue to ensure that the unplanned maintenance is kept below the 14,000. However, based on the reliability and explained by the minister, we do cater for two other scenarios. In terms of the EAF target, and that's a non-negotiable. I think in keeping with our commitments with our shareholder and with the NECOM, the target will continue. It's set at 65% EAF, and then we will aspire towards moving towards 70%. So as much as we didn't achieve the target for the last year, I think there's non-negotiable from the shareholder side. I think even pushing from the board wants to see us actually achieve the generation recovery plan. I think that's pretty much what I covered, Minister.
Thank you very much, Eric. Just to make the point, Ronnie, I say that what we are tracking is a trend line. So a longitudinal study over a prolonged period. We use May of 2023 as a baseline and see how we're doing relative to that. And I make the point that given the nature of these engineering units, it's almost a given that they are going to have setbacks. By setbacks, although we can see the degree to which some of these machines, when they come back, they are becoming more and more reliable, the efficiency levels are higher, you find that there will still be those units that fail. So when those units fail, as Eric was saying, that you see that one given day is worse than the other, you are going to experience that setback. The instrument you have is load shedding. What we are measuring is a trend line over that period. So even if it means that tomorrow or sometime in the future, sometime this week, there's load shedding, whatever the stage is, what we are looking at is a trend line. I think that's the point that I've been making. So I'm just saying that those setbacks are given. So what we're trying to do is to reduce those setbacks, but also when they occur, we should have sufficient buffer not to resort to the instrument of load shedding as something that is going to help us to support the grid, because at that time you'd have had rich conditions of energy sovereignty. So really load shedding is not an instrument that you are going to rely on because there's sufficient generating capacity. And then to Katla, I just want to make an important point that the vast and overwhelming majority of the men and women at Eskom are honest, diligent, professional, competent, and patriotic. I think it's a point I want to make. Significant and overwhelming, a critical mass of them. Like in any institution of the size of Eskom, you'll have those elements that seeks to undermine and derail the kind of progress that we're making. So those, of course, will be isolated and the necessary action will be taken. Like I said, it's a management function. To the extent that they require the assistance of the executive authority will do that. But essentially, that responsibility resides with Mr. Marokan and, of course, by the board, by extension. They'll take the necessary measures to the extent that they think that there's additional assistance required from the minister. They will shout and then we'll work with them. Like I said, also, the National Energy Crisis Committee that is supporting the minister, it's made up of a number of work stream. Work stream number 6 is people with the necessary expertise and qualities to help us to address the issues of malfeasance, leakage, corruption, whatever you choose to call it, and they are transfixed on the resolution of that problem. Of course, SANDAF still remains on site. Of course, their responsibility really is to look after the physical asset, this national key point. But a lot of this malfeasance doesn't happen at that level. With regards to SANDF, it's a direct, visible, and physical attack on the asset. So that's the one part. They remain to protect that asset. And then there are those things that undermine the operation. And I'm more than happy and confident that Mr. Marokani and Mr. Numalo and the various station managers are focused on the resolution of that problem. On the incentives with regards to PV, we did make the point that our view was should be extended over a period of time, should include additional components, not just the PV panels, but the more heavy, capital heavy elements, including inverters and batteries. And of course, we couldn't prevail before the previous budget was presented. And that's an ongoing conversation I'm having with the Minister of Finance. Because I think if we go that route, we are going to see that there's going to be an explosion in relation to the installation of rooftop solar, even at rates that are significantly higher than what we were experiencing now, but also designing those financial instruments that can help the less affluent, if you like, the poor, to be able to access this kind of solutions. Because I think the unintended consequences of this is that it's only the affluent and those who got the right risk profile who can borrow money from the banks and invest it in the rollout of solar PV, but the majority of people will be excluded. So we're working with Minister Kubai, Human Settlement, Minister Mantashe, the possibility of how you relook at that grant called INEP that is meant to connect people to the grid, to say that can't you repurpose elements of it to make possible for us to be able to connect the poor. And then on the issue of coal, yes, like I said, it's work that is in the domain of management, and we're more than confident rather that Mr. Marokani and Mr. Numalo, the head of generation, are on top of that, as indicated some of the interventions that have been made. And just to Terrence's point, no, the cabinet has said proceeds. So we are proceeding with the issue. So Terrence is referring to how we work with the National Transmission Company on financing solutions with regards to both the modernization and expansion of the grid. So we're just going to go back to cabinet to just give an update. So the decision has been made. So where we are at now is just a finalization of that approach with the NTCSA. And I think from our side, we thought that it's appropriate that we give the NTSA an opportunity to look at these models that we are proposing. And then the teams have been meeting consistently, and there's some degree of convergence. And once we're firmed up on an approach, we should be able to jointly share with the markets and the country how we're going to address that situation. And then with regards to the electricity regulation amendment, the ERA, of course, it has gone through the National Assembly. I did make the point the expectation is going to the NCOP. I made the point the last time, it's part of priority legislation. The leader of government business in the form of the deputy president is the one that is spearheading that effort. I still remain confident that we should be able to get it through the NCOP, and then it will have a life and give effect to the kind of reforms we want to introduce and ensure energy security going into the future. So let me really take the opportunity to thank everyone for making time, members of the media, the robust questions that we always get, because they can only help in clarifying these issues and making possible for, I think, the average person to consume the message. So thank you very much for your attendance. Wish you a lovely week ahead. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister. Colleagues, with that, we've come to the end of this morning's media briefing. We'll convene again in the next 2 weeks as per our cadence for these EAP media briefings. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.